Hey everyone, it's Michael. I hope you're doing well today. It's been a while. I haven't done a book review on this channel because I've been mainly focusing on my movie and TV show backlog on my shelves, so I did some reorganizing. As many of you can see, I haven't really done any videos on the channel in so long that you haven't seen anything new, but I haven't really been reading much this year. I've done some comic stuff that I've talked about on my comic channel, and that's about it, you know? But regular novels, short story collections, I've kind of read a little bit, but not like enough to do a book review, so today I have one that I've been reading all year. I've been trying to finish this thing up because it was a miserable experience. But anyway, this is a review for the Creepypasta collection, which is edited by Mr. Creepypasta. And of course, that's his like picture thing right there. If you don't know who Mr. Creepypasta is, or Creepypasta in general, I think most people do by this day and age, essentially they are new urban legend horror stories from the internet, basically coming from a website called Reddit that has this little subsection called No Sleep, where people post first-person, supposedly real short stories that are not actually real. They can include monsters, they can be gore, but the best ones, in my opinion, can be just the creepy, atmospheric ones. That's always the ones I loved growing up. And I'm going to tell you outright, for the 300 pages you have in this book, it does not include the big stuff that you probably know off the top of your head. I think most of the stories are brand new stories written by these authors that you may be familiar with. Some narrators on YouTube that used to narrate creepypasta stories for their YouTube channels. Mr. Creepypasta himself, the editor of this collection, is one of those. He's the first one I ever heard of. And to this day, I still watch some of his stuff here and there, because I think he puts a lot of effort and time into it. Most of these other guys have just disappeared. Like, either that or they just kind of slowed down and stopped making videos for Creepypasta. But Creepypasta is a stupid name. I still think it's dumb to this day. I don't understand why it was called that. But even so, I hoped that this collection would be good. But like I said, the big stuff is not in here, like Slender Man, like The Rake, which I think 2 of those should have been in here immediately. That should have been the first 2 you put in here. But there is some interesting other stuff in here I do want to talk about. And if you're a big Creepypasta fan, I wouldn't buy this until you see the rest of this review. It's going to be spoiler-free, obviously. I don't know how lengthy the review will be. But I wouldn't jump in and grab this immediately off the internet, even though it's fairly cheap to get your hands on. I've had this book for probably 5 years at this point, and I've wanted to read it really bad. Because I liked the cover, and I liked Mr. Creepypasta, and I liked a lot of the guys involved with this, for that matter. But it was rough. It was really rough. Can I just be honest with you? So I guess I'll go in and I'll try to give you a little idea of each story in here, if I can remember anything that actually happened in them. Because like I said, it's taken me a long time. I tried to go through and refresh my memory on a lot of these stories last night, but man, this was a rough book. Can I just tell you that? There is a lot more bad than good, and usually in these anthology collections, like the last book I reviewed on this channel was from one author, Bentley Little, and it was called The Collection. And there was a lot of mixed good and bad. I think there was a little bit more good than bad, if I remember correctly, but that was like 9 months ago when I reviewed that book, so it's a little rough coming to my mind right now. But usually anthology books from one author or multiple authors, typically for me, get like a 3 out of 5. I can tell you up front, this is going to rank lower than that. Because it was a rough read, man. And that's coming from somebody who isn't a hardcore fan of Creepypasta, nor was I ever. But I liked it enough to read the big hitters. But the stuff that I love, like Candle Cove, isn't in here, which is a shame in my opinion. But anyway, let's start off with the book. You have an intro for Mr. Creepypasta, which is cool. Again, I really love that guy. Seems like a really cool dude and a family guy, so I like that about him. But one author that I was super shocked to be in here, that I was really excited about, is Vincent Vinacava, who was a guy who wrote a lot of Creepypasta cool stuff back in the day. And it could range, again, from really gory and creative in that, in my opinion, to something really atmospheric and nice. And I always thought Vincent Vinacava was extremely talented. I really liked his work. And both of his stories in here, that cap off the front and the back, they bookend the entire story. Not in like a VHS movie way where you have like a wraparound thing. It's not like that. It's just 2 separate stories for the beginning and the end of the book. By the way, most of these stories are like 10 pages long. Some go further than that, but not by much. Vincent Vinicava's stories in here were not good Vincent Vinicava, so I hope and pray if anybody read this book and has never heard of Vincent Vinicava, go check out his stuff, because he's great. I really like him. I want to review his actual ebooks or a physical copy if I can get my hands on them at some point for you all, as I get more back into books over time. Again, I still have so many movies and shows next year is probably going to be dedicated to that backlog too, but I would love to talk about Vincent Vinicava's stuff because he's a great writer in my opinion. But his story, Picture This, is like a little bit of description, and then it says, and picture this, and it tells you something else, and it just does it repetitively over and over again. This was not good. I did not like it, in my opinion, so moving along. No offense to Vincent Vinicava. Again, I hope I made it very clear I'm a big, big fan of the guy. Love his work, dude. Creeping Crimson may very well be the best story in here. I loved it. It was from Michael Marks. I don't know all of these people's work from things they did in the Creepypasta community. I just know if Mr. Creepypasta was friends with them or knew their work or had narrated their work on his YouTube channel, that it was probably something fairly, somebody fairly important, I would say, to the community, which is cool. I think that's a very admirable thing. But Creeping Crimson basically takes place at a hotel, and some weird things happen in that hotel involving, I guess, what you could describe as like an infection of like the walls and like all kinds of shit happening in there. We follow many people living there or staying there at this particular night, and it is pretty crazy as a creature feature. I would love to see Creeping Crimson get like a new season of the show Channel Zero, which each season was based on a famous creepypasta like Candle Cove for season 1. Pretzel Jack was on season 4, which is amazing. You should totally check out Channel Zero if you've never seen it. If they ever come back, they should do a season 5 and make it Creeping Crimson. It would be awesome with the whole hotel setup. It's great. I loved it. Phenomenal story. Like I said, might very well be the best story in here for my personal taste. Teeny Tiny by Max Lobdell. Lobdell, excuse me. Sorry, bro. Sorry, bro. This was so horrific in every way possible. Again, possibly the best story in here. Basically, there's a girl who's always kind of thought about her weight. It's always been on her brain because of family and life and whatever. And I think at one point, she either works, if I remember correctly, something like that happened, but she's in like a hospital cancer therapy place, and she gets her hands on some of that gel stuff that helps along with the machinery to do the radiation therapy on cancer patients. And she begins to try to use that for weight loss. And I'm going to tell you, it is grisly, man. It's a great story. I loved it. If you love gore, this is a great story. Definitely a huge recommendation from me. The Horror from the Vault by Isaac Boisenau. I'm so sorry, guys. I'm so sorry. I did not like this one. I don't remember much of it. When I refreshed my memory a little bit of it last night, I was not into it. It's kind of like a scientist's email log, and that's about it. It was alright from what I remember of it. Perfume by Michael Whitehouse. Don't remember anything about it. I'm sorry, I just don't. Even when I tried to refresh my memory, I was not about to reread that whole story just to find out what it was about. If I don't remember, then I probably didn't like it that much. It's just the truth. A Dark Stretch of Road by Barnabas Damos, which surprised the shit out of me. What happened to Barnabas Damos? He was a YouTube narrator that I enjoyed. Apparently he's a sort of a kind of writer on the side too. He focuses a lot on like horror with gay characters and that kind of thing. And this was no different from that, but this was like shitty Pixar horror types of stuff. I love Barnabas Damos. I think he has a great, great voice, and I think he could be a great YouTube narrator or like a voice actor or anything if he would put his mind to that and get some talent agent or something to push him out there. But I think he quit, if I remember correctly, which is a shame because I always liked Barnabas Damos. But anyway, this story was basically about a lesbian couple who happened to be driving on a dark road, and it was like a 4-page story, and something weird happened, and it was stupid. It was okay for this kind of collection, but I'm like, this is a big problem I have, guys. Not every story in here are written like creepypasta. Number one, creepypasta, as I said earlier, has to be in first person because it's somebody in a very Lovecraftian way. Not in like the atmosphere always, but in a very Lovecraftian diary way. It's like someone writing a letter to you or writing their last moments before something kills them, telling you what happened. That's what made creepypasta so interesting to me. Even though it would change around on tenses and stuff, these were basically, you could almost equate them to like fan fiction, but not based on like IPs like Star Wars and stuff. It was just somebody's own project that didn't have editors, you know, famously working on these things. Not always. I assume some do in the more famous parts of the department, like Vincent Vinicava, but still, I love that about that. I don't even think this story was in first person, if I remember correctly. I know a couple of these weren't, which was bizarre to me. They were just straight out short stories, and they weren't that good most of the time. As I told you, a lot of these were really, really, really bland and boring and bad, I would say, too. There were many times that I would see words in this book, not just in Barnabas Damo's story. I'm not trying to stop here to say that about his story, but the book itself, Mr. Creepypasta must have tried with editing, but he must not be good when it comes to grammar or tenses, because that shit changes around so much, and there are constantly words that do not exist being used in here. And I'm not like a weird grammar police dude about that. Like, I don't know. You know, there are debates on different words that could or couldn't exist. Some of them are just practically not real for the context of a sentence they're being used in, and I find that very distracting in here. And there were a lot of people saying that on like Goodreads reviews. I think I saw some on Amazon even saying that as well. These guys really needed to go through a couple more drafts of reviewing the book before they solidified it, finished it, but it is what it is. But Barnabas Damo's story wasn't even in first person, so like why? Why did you have that here, aside from being involved in the project? I don't know. That's just me. But I do love Barnabas. Go check out his YouTube channel. I don't know if he's putting up anything anymore. A Trick of Perspective by God, I can't read today. Matt Demersky. Don't remember anything about it. Tried to refresh my memory, as I said. Don't remember shit about it. It's probably bad. Down in the Library Basement by Rona Vasalar. I don't know. Really enjoyed this story. Thought it was really cool for what it was. Actually forgot about the story until I refreshed my memory last night. Basically, there's a library employee who is like a generational library employee. And I think it was the person's mom tells them, hey, there is something in the basement. I need you to like leave out candy or food or something like that for whatever this is. Just don't go down there. And it was kind of cool. I did like that story. It's kind of generic. It's kind of generic, just to be honest with you. But I didn't hate it at all. I thought it was fine for what it was. I thought it was pretty good for what it was. So there's that. Voices in the Spirit Box by Michael Marks again. Did not like this one all that great. Basically, a guy's mom got murdered, and it was like kind of a ghost story, but I didn't really get into it as much as I hoped I would. It's not a bad story. It's just kind of generic and forgettable, as you can tell. But it is what it is. I feel bad for Michael Marks. I'm not trying to beat up on him or any of these other authors, but that's just me trying to make the proof because I'm a reviewer. I want to make sure somebody doesn't spend their money on the book and not be happy with what they get, especially if they were like me going into this, not checking the book of contacts or anything, or the contents page. I don't know what we're calling it anymore, but just to see what was listed in here like I thought would be the Rake, Slenderman, all of that, and it wasn't. So I was kind of bummed about that after I spent the money on this thing. I don't want people to fall for that. When Dusk Falls on Hadley Township by T.W. Grimm. Didn't like it all that much, thought it was okay. Kind of a town type of story. It is what it is. They Die Nameless by Aaron Shotwell. This is one of those stories that reminds me very much of a Stephen King story about a young man that was kind of losing his mind, but it was about him and his brother, if I remember correctly, but he's also kind of losing his memory. This is kind of the same thing. This guy for like 12 hours had been writing down his name and stuff to help himself remember because his memory is going so bad. There's more details than that to this story, but that's the general thing I remember, the general concept. I don't feel like it's a ripoff of the Stephen King story I'm talking about, but I didn't like this one all that much. That's more of a personal taste thing. I feel like other people would like this story more than me, but that's just my opinion. The Nice Guy by Well Hay Productions. I don't remember anything about the story, therefore I just consider it forgettable. I'm sorry, I just do. The Yellow Raincoat by Sarah Cairns. Carnes? I don't know how to say the name. Don't remember it. I'm sorry, it's probably kind of generic or bad at that point. Forgettable, you know? Depression is a Demon by Gold Coin. Might be one of the worst ones in here. Wasn't interested in it at all. It was just a weird thing about demons and about, like, I think this is the one too that was talking about like your peripheral vision. There was some story in here that was talking about like when you're in the shower and you see something move behind the curtain and then it turns out you didn't see anything when you look directly at it, but out of your peripheral you're seeing something. There was some story in here. This may have been the one. If I'm wrong, forgive me, Gold Coin. But there was one in here that was like that. And I was like, this sucks. I've seen this before, you know? And it may be a posting from No Sleep, but I think the majority, if not all the stories, are brand new to this. I only looked up a couple, like the next one that I loved as well, called Licks from a Bear by Max Lobdell once again. This one was pretty grisly as well. Basically, there's a guy who is kind of performing almost like a self-lobotomy. He believes, like kind of like what I saw in one of the Saw movies, I think it was Saw 3, that basically, if he takes a drill bit on a drill, and drills a hole into one part of his head, in his skull, that it'll relieve some pressure on his brain and allow it to kind of stick out a little bit, and then it'll actually allow him to become smarter, have better memory, and that actually begins to work at first. But then he becomes obsessed with it, and he keeps drilling holes. And that's a little bit too much info, but I'm going to tell you, it is a nasty story. It's wonderful. If you love it, if you love that kind of thing, if it sounds cool, check it out for sure. Let's see, Psychosis by Matt Demersky. Wasn't crazy about this one either. Thought it was kind of bland, if not bad. It is what it is. She Beneath the Tree by Michael Marks. This was actually another really good story in here for the most part. Kind of generic, but I really liked it for the most part. Basically, there's a guy who used to live at a place. There's a tree there. And a lot of bad things happen with this tree. He goes home one day trying to prepare this house for he and his wife and their, or was it girlfriend? I think it was he and his girlfriend. I can't remember. But they also have a baby involved too. And he has to try to repair this house and things go wrong. This is not like a bloody, gross out book. It's kind of a mild supernatural thriller involving that tree. And I liked that. I thought that was kind of cool. So, you know, it's kind of a generic setting for a creepypasta. You see a lot of like, I went back to my childhood home types of books and stories and whatever from the No Sleep community. But that's fine, just do something with it. And I think the story tries to do something cool with it. Very interesting stuff. Kind of a generational horror thing too, if you know what that means. Like kind of passing down from grandparent to child to grandchild, so on and so on. That was kind of interesting here too. A lot of No Sleep stories end up having a part 2 that branches off, like in a story I'm going to talk about in a few stories here, called Bedtime, but we'll get there when we get there. But usually those part 2s, part 3s, so on and so on, those sequel stories kind of ruin the original story that I usually think is pretty good for anything on No Sleep, most of the time. And this is one of those ones I feel like could have used a part 2 to maybe go backwards. You know, kind of like the Fear Street movies did on Netflix, the R.L. Stine Fear Street stories. I feel like if they had went backwards on each sequel story to kind of delve into the last person's history with something, that could have been cool too, but we didn't do that. Anyway, decent story, I liked it. Smile. Montana by Aaron Shotwell. Didn't like it. Did not like this. Moving on, again, Aaron, I don't know you. I don't mean to be rude, just moving on. Bedtime by Michael Whitehouse, the one I talked about a moment ago. This one is like a 5-part story. It's like 50 pages long, and I loved the first story. Basically, there's a young boy. This story is basically a guy retelling what happened to him as a kid, and essentially when he was young, I think he was like 8 or 7 or 6 or something, he had a bunk bed in his room. His older brother moved out of the room, so the bunk bed on the bottom was empty. He slept in the top bunk, and the older brother went to the other side of the house to live in one of those other rooms because he wanted his own room now that he was a lot older. And at nighttime, the young boy that we're following, again, sleeps in the top bunk, he keeps hearing the sheets rustling in the bottom bunk at night, like somebody's spinning around in their sleep down there. And he starts to hear noises. Something begins to poke him in between the slats where his mattress would be exposed through the bottom of the bed. So he's getting poked in the ribs and stuff, and he's not really sure what's going on there. I'm going to tell you, the first story out of this like 5-part thing for the bedtime story, series, whatever we're calling it, it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal, man. The last line of that first part was brilliant. And this is one of those ones that begins, like I said, to get ruined with sequel stories, in my opinion. Part 2 comes along, it's another event that happened not too long after it. Part 3 comes along, oh, something else happened later on in years. Part 4 or whatever happens, oh, well, now I'm an adult, this is what happened. Part 5, well, damn, that happened to me as an adult, now I gotta do this to solve it. No, you don't need that. It's too much. I feel like it was the internet pressure. You get hits on something like a book review or a YouTube video you make, and you decide to make more and more and more, and a lot of the time the content isn't as good as it could be. You know, and that first bedtime story was perfect. It may have been my favorite story, period, in here, but those sequel stories tying to it kind of ruined it a little bit. But that's just my opinion. Otherwise, great work, mostly well written, I would say. A lot of these stories are mostly well written, just so you know. I think Vincent Vinacava's are like the most prim and properly written, the way they are and what they're going for. Everybody else's has grammar issues and so on, like I said. But it is what it is. Let's see, the final story in here after bedtime is the final Vincent Vinacava story, Jeff the Killer Right on Time. Yes, a Jeff the Killer story, the one that everybody writes about all the time. Is it true that nobody knows who created Jeff the Killer? I remember hearing something like that once upon a time. But anyway, this is a story about Jeff. We're watching from his perspective as and it doesn't even make any sense how we're being told this story, but it is what it is. I still love Vincent Vinacava. This may be the worst thing I've ever read from him, because it's a Jeff the Killer story. What the fuck did you expect? Jeff the Killer is boring. I've never been a fan of it. I think most older people who have tried Creepypasta eventually came across Jeff the Killer, where the younger generation, like when I was in high school, they would rave about how great Jeff the Killer stories were. It was a lot of younger people's, like when I was in high school, you would have had somebody in middle grade saying that it was like the best. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? I don't like Jeff the Killer. I immediately was turned off by this. But anyway, getting to the story, we follow Jeff's perspective as he stalks a young woman, and someone beats him to the punch of killing this woman, but it may have been a trap. That's all I have to tell you. It's like a 9-page story, and I was not into it. The ending sucked. I don't know if it was a statement from Vincent Vinacava about Jeff the Killer in general or what. I didn't like it. I thought it sucked ass, but that's just me. Anyway, that is the collection of stories here. I don't even know how many stories that they had in here. Maybe 15? I don't know. This was really rough, man. And like I said, there was more bad in here than good to me. Because things would start out good, they'd get ruined, or things were mostly generic and dull and forgettable. There was a lot of that in this book, and I just don't think there's an excuse for that, especially with how much good stuff are out there in the Creepypasta community. Maybe Mr. Creepypasta had a trouble trying to reach out to people. Maybe there was some bad blood out there. I don't know, but I understand having a book that had brand new stories that nobody put out online that were famous writers. I understand that. But man, things like The Rake and Slender Man, which are basically public domain, deserve to be in here, in my opinion. Even though I don't even love the Slender Man story. It was so popular and prominent. Somebody sees a book at Barnes & Noble like I did when I bought this. You see the word Creepypasta on a fucking book, an anthology at that. You assume Slender Man would be in here, as popular as he was. He even got a movie and video games and everything else. I'm just surprised by the fact that that wasn't included in here. I don't know. There's a lot of other great creepypasta out there, guys. You can look up some recommendations on Reddit, on other websites like Google, YouTube probably. There are some great creepypastas that will haunt your dreams, man. I love them, typically, when I find a really good one, but I'm super picky because, again, it typically reads like fan fiction all too often, being very amateurish and being a lot of places where writers start for the first time. And all of us who like to write have been there at some point. I specifically love horror, so I've tried my hardest to get into creepypasta. The best I can do is go there, like on Reddit, on the No Sleep subreddit, and basically try to filter it out to what the best of this last month or so was, or all time, or anything like that, and try to read those types of stories. Because that's about the only ones that are quality most of the time nowadays, now that creepypasta's kind of died out, and the trend is dead, and people have grown up and moved on, and maybe they're writing books now, I don't know. But I wanted to root for this, I just can't. It's a really, really more negative mixed bag than a mixed even bag, you know? It's like, I don't even know what to describe it as. It's like getting a pack of peanuts and most of the shit is walnuts. Who likes that? Who wants that? We want cashews, motherfucker. Anyway, Creepypasta collection, big mixed bag, dude. Not a fan of it. If I had to rate it on a 5-star basis, being honest with you, even with the stories I loved in here, it's a 2 out of 5 stars maximum for the full collection. If you want to buy it to support the creators, that's cool. I appreciate you for doing that. That's a good thing. But number 2, man, you're probably not going to like it, even if you love Creepypasta more than I do, because there's a lot of quality issues in here, from the editing to the grammar, all of that shit I talked about. All of those things are problems, but not formatting, which was wild to me. I'm used to seeing all of that collectively, but it didn't happen. Anyway, 2 out of 5 stars for me for the Creepypasta collection. I would love to hear what you all have to say about this down in the comment section down below if you've read it. This review, even though it's a comeback, don't call it a comeback, we will probably not get many views for this channel on my video because people don't give a shit about Creepypasta anymore, which is sad because Channel Zero was amazing as a TV show. But, oh well. I hope you guys enjoyed the book review. I hope you enjoyed this book if you read it. Let me know everything you think about it and Creepypasta and even Mr. Creepypasta down below. Check out all these guys, their work, everything down in the comments. Not in the comments, but you know what I mean. Check it out on the different websites they're spread to. Thank you all. God bless you guys. Catch you later, and goodbye.